You've selected a country to visit, you're working on your paperwork, and now you're leaving soon. As you continue to prepare for what lies ahead, we recommend that you connect with your team and host 3 separate meetings in advance. For your team meetings, you could use a simple structure. For example, you could start with an icebreaker or team building activity to help people get to know one another. Continue with ministry preparation, like practicing skits and object lessons, then show a video with discussion questions, and close out the meeting with a devotional and prayer. There are also a few ways you could break up the content that should be covered. For your first meeting, you could show a One Hope testimony, teach about the biblical perspective on missions, and give an overview of the country that you'll be visiting. During meeting 2, you can share about fruitfulness and faithfulness from John 15 and go over the plans for ministry. Meeting 3 should be about practical tips for ministry in a different country, like culture shock, working with a translator, sharing personal testimonies, and what to pack. Some of your team members may feel intimidated to share their testimonies publicly. Encourage them not to let fear prevent them from potentially helping someone encounter Jesus for the very first time. Also, these are typically some of the most special times during a trip, with a lot of potential to move hearts for Christ. Once you've helped coach your team through their testimonies, there are other important points to emphasize that will help your team be on the same page. These cover a variety of topics and can serve as honest reminders for you and your team. A team's trip isn't a vacation. Remind them that they can do anything for 5 to 10 days. The food might be vastly different from what you're used to eating, and the showers may be lukewarm, but the focus of the trip and the main purpose is to minister effectively to people who need to hear the gospel and encounter the love of Jesus. There may be a time for a bit of sightseeing on the trip, but it's usually a good idea to downplay this in order to keep the team focused on the mission rather than on a special time of sightseeing and shopping. It's important to be flexible at all times. Just learn to go with the flow. The culture you are visiting may operate by different standards or by a different time frame than you're used to. Also, culture shock is very real. If you feel yourself or any team members becoming frustrated or angry, irritable or sad, this may be culture shock setting in. It's totally normal. Talk about it with your team in advance, and if you see any of these issues arise during the trip. For these trips, God picks the team, which means that everyone is there for a purpose. And if any team member joins the team or steps away during the process, know that it was always a part of His plan. It's a humbling privilege to be handpicked by God to represent Him in another country. Make sure your team knows you expect them to be Christ-like during the entire trip. It's important to note that there is a difference between peacetime and wartime leadership. Tell your team that your leadership will be set on wartime mentality during this trip. You know when to relax and when to have fun, but they need to know when you ask them to be quiet or cross the street or move quickly, it's because you're looking out for their best interests. Encourage strong obedience on this trip, even from any adult members. Lastly, let them know that they should be open to God turning their world upside down. Your team may experience God in ways that they have never experienced before. They will hear God whisper into their own heart, see a world in great need of Jesus, and know that they are making a difference in other people's lives. Sharing these points with your team will help your team build unity. We are praying your team meetings are fruitful and effective as you prepare for ministry together.